Okay, let's go. Welcome again to this new session of the Climate Social Forum. We have now Maria Grazia Midulla from WWF Italy and Luca Iacoboni from GreenPeace Italy. And the topic of this round floor is about environmental harmful subsidies. We know that actually is one of the things that we have to address also to foster the transition, but we realize that sometimes it's very hard to stop them and to create the condition for a right finance. We told today about climate finance and how to address also the resources into the right way and right transition. But of course, it's always hard to stop the environmental harmful subsidies. And properly on that, I will start to give the floor to the two speakers, so Luca and Maria Grazia, and you have now a first talk of 7 minutes where you can address your point of view and also of your organization on the topic of the environmental harmful subsidies.
Shall I start?
Yes, go ahead.
Right. Okay, so thanks for inviting us. Well, myself, but basically GreenPeace. I work in GreenPeace as climate and energy campaigner. So somehow my daily work is also about subsidies, and in particular myself, I studied environmental economics. So it's a very important theme and issue that usually is also discussed in universities and also economical universities, even if it's not so normal to talk about the environment in such courses. Basically, the question is, as is stated on the program, why is it so difficult to cut this kind of subsidies? Why is it so difficult to cut subsidies that we are saying are harmful for the environment, so for the place where we live, for the air that we breathe, for the water that we drink, and for the food that we eat? Why is it so difficult? It should be absolutely normal to cut this kind of subsidies. When we talk about subsidies, we talk about public money, and when we talk about public money, we talk about our money. So it's quite evident that our money should not go to subsidize activities that are harmful for ourselves. Basically, this is what we are talking about. And the question should be easy, but it's not. Otherwise, would not exist a lot of associations and movements working on climate change, working on environment in general, such as WWF, for example, and working on these subsidies that, especially in Italy, but all over the world, are a very important, are one of the main reasons why fossil fuels are still alive, I would say. Obviously, I don't have an answer to this question, so I'm sorry for this, but I have some thoughts for sure on this. And the first one is that is related also to the importance of this conference and of all this initiative that you are creating and building this year. And is the fact that how many people knows about these 19 billions that in Italy every year goes to activities that are harmful for the environment, and those 16-17 billions of these that goes to fossil fuels, so coal, oil, and gas, the so-called natural gas that we prefer to call fossil gas. My take is that most of the people doesn't know about these subsidies, and this is definitely the first point, because if people doesn't know about this, it's definitely more difficult to talk about this issue and to properly explain what happens with our money, with public money. So this is the first point. The information is not so good. In this sense, it's very welcome the report that it's like at its third edition done by the Minister of the Environment, that it's a list of these subsidies, and this is why I mentioned the 19 billions. So it's very welcome, but it's definitely not enough, even in terms of information. And one of the reason why I'm quite sure in saying this is that between 2017 and 2018, these subsidies increased their overall value, and this is clearly it's clearly the sign that we are not doing enough. The second question that I do myself when I tried to answer this question is, okay, most of the people doesn't know about these subsidies, but who knows? And in general, what is the perception of the people about fossil fuels and subsidies? Why every time that I talk about renewables, also with friends or family, to make it very Italian style, I feel the sensation that they think about renewables as something expensive, as something not really trustable, and something like that. And when I talk about fossil fuels and the subsidies to fossil fuels, I have the feeling that it's something given, it's something normal, it's something that we cannot cut. This is another important point, because most of the people doesn't know, point one, but also those who somehow knows this thing have a strange perception, a perception of something that that is like this. So we cannot modify this, and this again is very important. And also then when sometimes we see governments trying to tackle this point, this issue of subsidies, our media tell the story as it happened for the Gilets jaunes in France, that if we cut this kind of subsidies, we are sort of creating a damage to the lower income people. So I think these are three elements that are definitely important when we talk about why we are not able, and we in Italy are not able to tackle this issue. Well, the story it's slightly different. First of all, it's totally crazy that all over the world fossil fuels are more subsidized than renewable energies, and is the same also in Italy. This is totally crazy also on an economic level, because subsidies are basically given to new technologies in order to enter the market. Is what happened with solar. Efficiently or not, solar entered in the energy market thanks to subsidies. But right now, solar energy is cheaper than gas energy, for example. I would say all over the world, but still gas energy is heavily subsidized also in Europe. And this is nonsense, because if an energy is not able to stay in the market, well, we should not subsidize if does not give us an added value. But we know that fossil fuels are not giving any added value on environmental level right now, but are instead fueling the climate crisis. So in order to justify these subsidies, we should have at least an added value in terms of jobs, or anyway, the so-called PIL in Italian, gross domestic product in English. But again, this is not really the case. We as Greenpeace in Italy commissioned a report, a study, to see if it's still possible to decarbonize by 2040. So no fossil fuels by 2040 in Italy? And the answer is yes. But what would happen to all the jobs and the economy, I would say, in this case? Well, the answer is that in terms of jobs, if we speed up the so-called energy transition, if we quit fossil fuels, and if we go through a model that is 100% renewable powered by 2040, well, this would mean more jobs created also in a short term or in medium term, so by 2030. What I'm saying is that by really doing this energy transition, we will have approximately 130,000 jobs created by 2030, while with the governmental plan that is mostly focusing on gas, we will have less than 100,000 jobs created, more or less 98,000. So again, why are we giving these subsidies? Maybe because it's not technically needed to use fossil fuels. It's not environmental friendly, let's say. Instead, it is harmful. It's not a matter of jobs, of creating jobs, and it's not even a matter of economy. Because, because we clearly said in this study that this energy transition that is technically feasible would somehow self-pay, because we will not import more fossil gas primarily, and then coal and oil. So this means that on an economical level, on a technical level, these kind of subsidies are also heavily inefficient. And I will close with a point that is, in my opinion, very somehow self-explanatory, because we could say that we don't want to cut these kind of subsidies because we don't want to, scare the investor, giving the idea that Italy is a place where you give some subsidies, then you cut, then you give again, and so no investment would come to Italy because it's a difficult place in this sense. Unfortunately, this is not the case, because on the renewable side of the energy, a few governments ago, we saw a legislative initiative that was exactly going to cut the subsidies given to renewables, but not in the future, not future subsidies, but also past subsidies. So money already given, or at least already agreed with also small and medium enterprises, but also big companies, to produce renewable energy. What does this mean? That we as country and all the governments that have been in place in these years just have two different ways of approach the issue of subsidies when we are talking about fossil fuels or renewable energies. When we talk about renewable energies, subsidies become public money, so money from the people that we use to see, somehow do this energy transition. But we hear always talking about this kind of subsidies given to renewables as something very bad for the people. While when we talk about subsidies given to fossil fuel, let's say the background is completely different. We never hear about this as public money, people money given to fossil fuel, but we hear talking about this like something that is perfectly fine, that is creating jobs, that is creating an economic added value for our country. Well, this is basically false. So I don't have an answer on the main question of this panel, that is, why are not we able to cut this kind of subsidies? But for sure, I have one point, that is, when we talk about subsidies, we have to talk clearly and in a proper way, both if we're talking about fossil fuels and renewables. Only if we do this, we will be able to tackle this issue and to make this socially acceptable also for all the people. And with this, I guess I stayed more or less in the time for what I could see on my computer. So I end here.
Thank you very much, Luca. And the floor is for Maria Grazia now.
Okay, I don't have a lot to add to what Luca said. I would like to say that I've been involved in the fossil fuel subsidies issue for a long time. And I would like to remind you that it was the G20 in 2009 in Pittsburgh, which decided to phase out the fossil fuels subsidies. And I can say that very little have been done. One of the things that have been done are the 3 catalogs that the Ministry of Environment in Italy issued. And that's, I think, one of the few things that we can be proud about. But at the same time, there are a lot of studies on how to phase out fossil fuels, especially in developing countries where fossil fuel subsidies are important for poor people. And the main issue I always say, and I will say also in this occasion, is that you have to make clear to people where the money goes. So if you take out fossil fuel subsidies for that are important for poor people, you have to make clear that the same money don't go to something very unclear, and but to something that is really affecting people. So it could be in one country they were very successful with the health system. They made the health system available for free for everybody. That was very successful. Or you could decide that that the public transport is for free for people. Again, this is also a way of having an environmental advantage, as Luca was saying. But that's something important. We know that in theory we would like to take money from fossil fuels and fuel the transition, the just transition, as we just discussed before. But that's not so easy to do, because for instance, one issue that we are discussing now with a lot of other constituencies is that the people who get the subsidies, for instance, like let's take the drivers or the lorries for international transportation and so on, they would like to keep the money for them in order to have a just transition. But that is difficult because it doesn't allow to make all the environment, the framework, the link to make the transition. I mean, the transition is not just sector by sector, but it should be systemic. Otherwise, it's not a transition. It's just a conversion of a sector. So that's why it's so difficult. And another issue that we know very well in Italy, and at the moment we have only Italians here, so I think we understand very well. The other issue is that, of course, what becomes a temporary measure in order to help a sector, then very often, especially for the powerful sectors, that's another answer, but somehow it becomes something that is permanent. So if it is, especially if it is for a very powerful lobby like drivers or like something else. So at the end, the main issue is that at the moment, what I call the incentives for renewables that were well revised in Italy. I would like to also to remind that in Italy the incentives for renewables have been scaled down, and that is something that affected them very heavily. But the main issue is that if the money should go from powerful sector to sectors that are still weak, politically weak, that's difficult. So this is the answer. And again, the only way to do so is the power of people somehow, the power of consumers, the power of voters, and so on. It is the only way to make it possible, because otherwise it's unlike that the money, the people in power, we say, okay, we don't want money, please go ahead and go and give the money to the not very powerful ones. And it is the same issue with all the sectors, not only fossil fuels. If you think also to the difficulties in reforming the agriculture in Europe, And you know that in Europe, agriculture is heavily subsidized, and this affects also the rest of especially the poor countries, because in the not poor countries, agriculture is heavily subsidized all the same, like in the US. Why we cannot reform that? Because it is a very powerful constituency, and the status quo is somehow something that they would like to see. I think that for agriculture, especially with climate change, they will be forced to change sooner or later. I would like to say the last thing: when you wait for the transition, you worker, you are not more powerful. You are not waiting for the best, because by waiting, what you will face at a certain moment will be the collapse of the sector that you are in, because the transformation will take place, that's for sure. And we are on the verge of seeing something like that on the automotive sector, in the automotive sector, and in some countries we are not ready enough. We are waiting, and by waiting, we are in a more dangerous situation. Over.
Thank you, Maria Grazia, and thank you also to Luca. And listening to your talks, it reminds me some question, and also I want to mention a famous thinker, Italian thinker, that was Alex Langer, that he said that somehow the change, the ecological transition, will be possible only if it will also a social desire. So you mentioned, Maria Grazia, for example, the role of the civil society, that if it turns on positive, it's have a great power to make the change. But in the same way, if it puts some resistance, it will like stop a little bit the transition. I want to mention one episode that surely you will know, that is the case, for example, of the Silesia region that we saw into the in COP24, where the transition was asked, but there were some lack of perception also from the industry sector and also from the workers, that this could be like damaging their job and so on. So one point properly on this, how to like engage also the workers and also the most resistant against transition, as they can perceive that the change, as Maria Grazia said, is not for the sake of being power, but if you resist, you finally became maybe weaker also in terms of investments and so on. Wants to come? Luca? Or...
I think, Maria Grazia, if you want, you can start, and I will add something in case, because you mentioned this point.
Of course, we in the international arena, but also country by country, we speak a lot with the trade unions. And generally, the trade unions are aware of this risk. But what you not always what they agree in theory in a powerful way. I would like to remind the slogan by the International Trade Union. There is no job on a dead planet. That's the slogan by the trade unions at international level. Not always it's really applicable at the national level or at local level. But we shouldn't be. We should be sympathetic with these people, because we understand that losing a job is not is losing the way the way of life you are used to, or losing the source of money for your family and so on. The problem is that we should make institutions, governments, local governments accountable for that. And they have to create the environment for what, in order to make the transition softer, to minimize the impact of the transition. But if they don't do so, and they just keep saying, oh, we want the coal power plant open because that's we don't have an alternative, then what will happen is that with the cost of CO2 at high level, it will be no economically feasible to start to use the coal power plant, and then the workers will be without a job. It happened to us in Italy, in Porto Tolle. Enel wanted to reconvert a power plant from oil to coal. We were opposing to them and to that, and we were saying, let's try find an alternative. They didn't find it. At the end, the workers were out of job. The Enel decided that it was not economically feasible to do what they wanted to do, and that was the end of the job for those people. So that's why I think it's very important that people engage directly on this, but with the idea, not people when when you say to the people change, they don't like it, because change means not having any safeness in life. So we must provide some social provisions, social assistance, in order to make people sure that the transition is not harmful for them. Otherwise, the big contradiction that we always have had is that, for instance, in the factories in which they use very harmful substances, chemicals, and others, the workers are against the citizens, but the workers are the first victims of the chemicals, the damaging chemicals. So they use the poor against the poor. That's the trick, and we have to try not to end up in this vicious circle.
Thank you, Maria Grazia. Luca, if you want to add something.
Well, obviously, I totally and fully agree with what Maria Grazia said. And for us, it's not the first time we have this question. And I guess that we tend to not learn from the past. And somehow this question should not be asked to environmentalists, but to the companies, because what we are seeing today, or better, what we are deciding and doing today, or what they, as big oil and gas and coal and automotive companies, decide today, somehow will have effects in the next 20 years. And I try to explain myself a bit better. We know that fossil fuels have to go out of our energy mix. For us by 2040 in Europe, and 2050 all over the world, for someone else by 2050, 2030, but it's clear that we'll be out of the energy mix if we want to seriously tackle climate change. So companies and big companies that are in this field, that work and do business on oil, gas, and coal, but let's stay on oil and gas, that actually it's more important for Italy, especially the gas. The behavior that they have right now is definitely important, because if they decide to resist staying in their business as usual, more or less, saying, for example, that gas is part of the solution for climate change, and this is not what the science is saying. If they say that, for example, blue hydrogen is fundamental for the future, and if they say that climate change need more time to be solved and that the transition is not feasible, well, they are now taking a street and a decision that will bring in 20 years to have a crisis on the work level, because we know that in 20 years these energies will not be allowed anymore in Europe. Probably if it's not 20, it's 25, it's 19 or 30, but in few decades, and if you are at the top of a very big company, you have to think about decades of time, you are going to create this job crisis. If today you welcome the energy transition, you have few decades, probably 20 years, to move your workers and your business from what it is right now, the core business, to a different one. That doesn't mean to close your company, but means to move your investments from fossil fuels to renewables, means to move your workers from fossil fuels to renewables, your research from fossil fuels to new technologies and new renewables. If a company welcomes this seriously, this energy transition, in 20 years, they will not have any issue with their workers, because the renewable field, it's highly intensive in terms of jobs, more than gas or oil sector. But if right now we just resist, these companies just resist and oppose to the energy transition, when this transition will come and become reality, and this will happen, well, they will have a problem. And at that point, they will say, we have a job crisis. Yes, for sure, but it's just the consequence of wrong decisions taken right now. This is for me very, very clear, but I think it's probably not clear enough when we talk about this.
Thank you, Luca, and thank you, Grazia. Yes, we can refer somewhere to the cost of the opportunity loss. Also was this expression that explained a little bit the point. And thank you very much for your insight, because it helps us also on the Climate Social Forum in our goal that was born properly in the understanding that the social crisis, the work crisis, the unemployment crisis, and also the climate crisis, and now the health crisis are somehow very connected, and maybe some solution can be interlinkage between the several crises that we are facing. One last question comes obviously these days on the Paris Agreement. We are now in the anniversary. The last days that we faced on Saturday was the anniversary of 5 years of Paris Agreement, and somehow one of the point that an innovation that the Paris Agreement wanted to reach is to also involve the private sector, as Luca was saying, in investment in the transition. One opinion properly on that. Do you think that since now the involvement also of the private sector and also all the mechanisms that engage the markets towards transition, envisioning the Paris Agreement, have done some effects to foster and to, for example, make less competitive the investment in fossil fuels and so on, and so finally led the companies and facilitate the transition towards a no emission economy?
Maybe I can start. This is a very good question. I'm not a super fan of the only private initiative. I think that the public sector should play an important role, especially in doing the interests of the people, of the community, and not only the profits or extra profit. But on the other hand, it's clear that the private initiative is important. It's very much important, and somehow I would say in some cases also saved the Paris Agreement, because, for example, in the US during the Trump administration, we all know the position of that administration. But at the same time, renewables continued to run, especially in some states. And also because of the private initiative, because right now renewables are more convenient in economic level than fossil fuels very often, apart from subsidies. And this makes the private sector an important actor in the Paris Agreement. On the other hand, it's also clear that if there is not a proper and clear direction set by governments or in general by the public finance sector, this means that probably we will not reach the Paris Agreement goal of the so-called 1.5 objective, mainly because there is a matter of time. We don't have so much time. This is what the science is telling us, what the IPCC is repeating us every year, more or less, with their reports. And this means that we need together public and private sectors, especially on the finance level, to invest money in the right way. I don't want to go longer on this, leaving the space also for the other people to comment. But I think that in Europe we have some very important decisions that has been recently taken and will be taken, for example, by the central bank and the European investment banks, that are two very important financial actors that are really have to set the direction in one sense or the other. And there is no more time to, let's say, we have time to do the energy transition, but we don't have time to waste. So I personally think that both private and public sectors should very quickly go in that direction.
Thank you, Luca. Now a reply to Maria Grazia, and then we can give the floor to the participants.
I think that private finance is moving, and it's not a direct effect of the Paris Agreement. It's more the environment that the Paris Agreement created. But unfortunately, the last 4 years didn't help a lot at all because of the international situation and the international geopolitical situation. We hope that this scenario will change quite rapidly. I think you know that the president-elected Joe Biden announced that he wanted to have a sort of a climate summit, and that's we don't know when and how, but within 100 days of his mandate, so within 3 months from January. That's a good sign. And we will see if it will be a sign of cooperation at the international level. At the moment, we see that also China is fueling a lot of resources in the transition. And this will give to China a competition advantage. And hopefully other countries will understand that. So it will be a mixture of competition and cooperation that we could speed up a little bit things with the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is into force, entering into force this year. So it's a little bit too early to say, but the problem is what the countries are doing, and that's the most worrying thing. The countries don't have enough pledges, enough commitments in order to achieve the speed and the intensity of change that the IPCC told us we should have in order to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. And that's the real issue. And that's why we need the civil society to push at the national level and internationally. I hope that after COVID crisis, that also COVID crisis didn't help a lot. After COVID crisis, the youngsters will will make themselves heard. Also because if you think what is happening with the green recovery plans, if the green recovery plans are not green at all, or green only for a slice, and are very dark gray, brown for the rest of the cake, it will mean that the youngsters have a lot of debts for nothing, for no transition, and for a lot of environmental problems in the future. So they have environmental problems, climate change, and the debts. So I think the situation is really in a crucial moment. If we spend our money, for instance, in Italy, we spend our money for the gray or blue hydrogen, and we spend a lot of money on that, it will be a disaster for the next generation. That's the way of thinking that we should think. And I hope that also private finance will think in the same way. Will be able to distinguish. I mean, let's face it. For instance, the fact that some investors have decided not to invest in coal anymore have had a lot of influence on the fact that coal is not used anymore in Europe and so on. Or it is not, I mean, it's decreasing. It's used a lot in some countries in Europe, but it's decreasing. But so I think that's also important. And one part that is very important is the risks. I mean, what I was saying before, the fact that they face the collapse of some sectors is important for us, is important for workers, but is also important for investors, and they should consider it. Over.
Thank you very much, Maria Grazia. And now the floor for questions from the participants. So you can write in the chat or eventually ask for the turn or open the mic for asking question, and the floor is yours. Okay, Giancarlo, if you want to take the floor, go ahead.
Yes, good evening. And first of all, thank you for your very interesting contributions. In my opinion, this problem of subsidies to fossil fuels is one of the key problems, because it is a way to verify, first of all, the real political will of governments to do something serious, and to what extent politics is independent toward strong economic powers. And so we should all ask for abolition ever and ever, in every occasion, every time this is possible, like a mantra, in order to verify really what is the political will to do something serious. On the other side, I fear that a large part of the public may think that fossil fuel subsidies can keep gasoline, petrol prices low, and thus see them favorably. And on another side, we should pay attention to avoid the, how to say, the ricatto occupazionale, say we, okay. This is a great fear. I don't know what what is your position about this?
Okay, let's collect another question, then give the floor to the speakers. From Stefania.
Yeah, thank you so much for this very interesting debate. I just would like to raise a very crucial question, I would say, because we know that somehow the 25 years of the processes of the Conference of the Parties have kind of failed because they didn't really bring to any of the targets that we had aimed for, and the same relates to the protocol. Somehow it has failed, and then the emission trading schemes. We definitely would need proper sustainable policies like regulation, taxations, penalties. But what about the fact that there are, like in the banks, like unused funds, unused money, which are like stagnating in the banks? Like it's estimated it's like 3 trillion euros, which is just in the banks unused, and somehow they create social restlessness. So why don't we just push and this is something that Luca was also bringing up before, the investment bank to be issuing green bonds supported by the central bank, so that we can create a green union. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefania. Now the floor for the speakers to respond.
Just to answer to Giancarlo, I was speaking about ricatto occupazionale before. I spoke with other words and didn't say what it could be in English. Job blackmailing, I don't know. But anyway, it was something.
Yes, maybe occupational blackmail. Can it be?
Health has always been the main issue on which the blackmailing have been taking place. When I was really young, I was the Italian the focal point in Rome from a movement called the Democratic Medicine. So since then, I remember a lot of occasions in which putting one against the other, citizens against the workers, have been very successful. And last for us, last but not least, was Taranto, as you know. But I think that the only way to deal with this is to speak to think to a plan, to a different plan. So that's the way we should deal with this. I don't answer to Stefania. Maybe Luca would like to do so. Maybe we can share the.
Sure. And well, first of all, I'm not an expert of how much money are stagnating in the banks, very honestly. For sure, it's a leverage that should be used. But I think that as far as fossil fuel investments are still allowed, all the green bonds will not be enough. I think we should contemporarily at the same time work on the divestment and on the reinvestment. This is definitely important because it's a very easy idea behind all the divest strand of work that all over the world is spreading, and it's the fact that if we do not give money to fossil fuel projects will not become reality. This is definitely very easy, but it's true. And so yes, I am in favor of all the investments in green, and then obviously we should very clearly state what is green and what is not. But because as Maria Grazia was saying, carbon capture storage is not green, blue hydrogen is not green, it's just fueling the climate crisis. So this is definitely very important because it's the big, I think it's the big misunderstanding that the fossil fuel companies are pushing right now. But I'm also working on the finance and divest word, and the first answer that all the banks, private or public, and all the also insurance companies for investments and underwriting sector gives when we sit on the same table, or when in general the movements ask questions, is yes, but we are also investing in this green stuff. Yes, investing green it's important, but if we put €1 in something green and €10 in something definitely black, this is perfectly fitting with the definition of greenwashing, that for those who speak English is very clear, but for the Italians is still not so clear. So yes, for investing in green bonds and whatever, but also at the same time we have to work on policies that have to be implemented both on private and public finance, both by private and public financial actors, because invest in coal, oil, and gas should not be allowed anymore with public money, at least. Having done this, obviously money has to move to other sectors, and in my opinion must not be weapons or some other sectors that are still heavily financed by banks, but obviously on renewables. But if we do just one thing and not the other, it's not enough. Obviously, the first point of the answer is that I'm not an expert of how much stagnating money we have in the banks, but I agree that can be a leverage, even if there are some strict rules about the reserves that each bank has to keep there for security reasons. So I don't know about this. It's something new to me, and thanks for the thing, because I will definitely read more about it.
Thank you again to Luca and Maria Grazia. One last question, and then we can leave the speakers going, if there is. Okay. Even though we really thanks the speaker, Maria Grazia and Luca, for this fruitful discussion, I think that we today had the chance to engage a very, very insightful and also open discussion on the topic. So thank you very much again from me, myself, and I think also for the participant of the Climate Social Forum. And now we will stop the live session. With the participant of the Climate Forum, we will remain just to wrap up the day, like 10 minutes. And I kindly greet Maria Grazia and Luca, and keep Foster on, of course, in climate action. And thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting and organizing this. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.